Billy, the character, there'd been a whole action scene where he was featured as the one who has that big heroic moment. And that's what Zach, the actor, thought was happening. So when he went to go see it for the first time...
No way!
Yeah, he turned to the director and was like,
surprise!
What happened? I thought I was the one who gets to save the day. Yeah. And he was like, what's the name of this movie?
There you go.
Gizmo gets to be the hero.
3, 2, 1, punch it.
Could you jump to light speed in that tin can? Go back in time in the DeLorean. Will it crash or take to the sky? Tell me, smart guy, does it fly?
Welcome to Does It Fly? The podcast that puts your favorite sci-fi properties, inventions, and conceits to the test. I'm your mad scientist, Hakeem Oluseyi.
And I'm your pop culture expert, Tamara Krinsky. Time to dive into today's topic and see, does it fly? Hello, Hakeem.
Hey, Tamara, and everyone out there. Welcome back. That was close.
Does it fly?
That was close. That was so close. This is a few more lessons, a few more years of lessons, and I will nail it.
Yeah. You're working on it. Always working, always improving.
Always improving. So today, we're going to talk about everyone's favorite car. The Gremlin.
Is there really a car called the Gremlin?
Yeah, and they're not good. You know, there's a few cars in history that are known for not being the most aesthetically pleasing. So the Gremlin, you know, in the 70s, you had the Pacer. But the Gremlins we're talking about now are way cuter than the Gremlin automobile.
Well, it depends on what stage of their development you actually catch them in.
That's right. Because when they are a full-fledged gremlin, cute isn't necessarily the word, right? Yeah.
That's right. We are, of course, talking about the classic Gremlins released in 1984, directed by Joe Dante, executive produced by Steven Spielberg, and written by Chris Columbus. And the crazy thing about this movie is it was actually released in theaters on the very same day that Ghostbusters was released.
No way. Wow.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
They were both super popular then, so it did well. Yeah.
Yeah, it did really, really well. It did way better than the studio actually thought it was going to do.
Yeah, I bet. So that was like the golden day. You know how they have a golden age? The golden day of silly horror.
Exactly. Well, it was funny because when I was doing my rewatch of it, even before I knew about the Ghostbusters coincidence, I was kind of thinking that the sensibility of some of the Gremlins when they really let loose both in the first movie and the second movie reminded me a little bit of the sensibility of some of the wackier ghosts in Ghostbusters.
Yeah. It's a cultural thing, right? It was a cultural moment where it blended together. You know, the same thing happens in science. Quite often, you know, two people or more will just make the same discovery at about the same time.
Why do you think that is?
I guess in the sense, again, it's a cultural thing, right? So in the culture of science, there are certain problems we're all trying to solve simultaneously. And as the data builds up, as the tools of theory build up, you reach this nexus where now we're there. But then sometimes you have somebody like Einstein where there was very little, you know, when he came with relativity, there wasn't much experimental observations to say, we need to solve this. He just kind of went there on his crazy ownness.
Side note, this is very random, but when I was scrolling this morning, somebody posted, I guess it's a famous picture it's from the day of Einstein's death. And it's actually, they, instead of going graveside or to the service, they went into his office and took a picture of his desk as he left it.
Right.
And that thing is super messy.
Yeah. That's a famous picture among us nerds.
Yes.
among us science, physics nerds. And that wasn't uncommon in the 20s. My PhD advisor, he had a whole newspaper article about the messiness of his office. And literally there were papers you could not see the floor except for a walk path to his desk, and papers were stacked my height. Most were shorter than me, but I'm slightly over 6 feet. My height in there. Yeah. So anyway,
it might also be common in 2024, on my desk. All right, back to Gremlins. So, all right, this is a movie from 1984. However, there have been other additions to the franchise. There was a Gremlins 2 that came out in 1990. There is an animated series that is on Max that has gone through its first season, and its second season just started. So there may actually be people watching who are new to the Gremlins franchise, especially younger viewers who may be watching the animated series but haven't quite made it to watch the film yet. So this is your spoiler alert. We're going to be talking about some of the plot and some of the things that happen.
Yes.
So go watch it now, come back, watch us.
This episode of Does It Fly is presented by Razer Axon, a free application with incredible digital art to customize your desktop. Immerse in a rich collection of official high-resolution wallpapers from indie artists, popular game franchises, hit movies and TV shows, musicians, AI artists, and more. Feeling creative? Express your concepts via Axon Create to create your own wallpapers and generate matching chroma RGB effects with a few clicks. Visit Razer.com/Axon today to bring your desktop to life. That's right. And I tell you, even if you haven't seen it and you hear me talk about the science of them, I'm not spoiling nothing. Because it's all speculation. There's no, it is not coming from the movie where they give the big twist at the end, right?
Right. Well, okay. So just to be clear too, because we always look at, a particular aspect of a film.
Right.
In this particular episode, we are looking specifically at the idea. There are three main rules for Gremlins, one of which is do not let them get wet. And so today we are looking at the idea of water and multiplication in Gremlins. So Dr. O, hit me with some science.
All right, some science. So the first thing is before they are gremlins, after their water exposure, they're properly called Mogwai.
Mogwai. Yeah.
Mogwai. Yes. So if they were from where I'm from, people be like, yo, Mo, what's up? They wouldn't be Mogwai. Nobody would be like, hey, Ma, you confuse them with your mother. You know what I'm saying? So, Ma, Mogwai, Ma.
Ma. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying. Like the whole word, you would do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
No one's going to say all that Mogwai. So it's going to be shortened to Mo, is what I'm saying.
Well, that's the species name, but our main Mogwai,
that's right.
Our main Mogwai guy is Gizmo. They don't call him Mogwai. That's not his name.
Right.
Mogwai's
That's right.
Yeah.
Them their moles. Anyway, to the science of the reproduction of the moles. I made a mistake just a second ago when I said after they are exposed to water, they become gremlins. That is not correct. It is after they eat. So this form of reproduction is weird as displayed in the franchise because what happens is almost an instantaneous reaction. Right? They get in water. Next thing you know, they're going through great stress and difficulty. And then suddenly a few fur balls pop off of them.
Yeah. It's very cinematic.
There they are. I have reproduced, right? So that is what is known as asexual reproduction. It appears to be at face value. And there's a reason why I say that at face value. Because there's a couple of interpretations of what could be going on. Now, before I get to that, I have to go to something we've talked about before. What sort of natural environment would create such a creature? Creatures are adapted to their environments. So if you look at this, eating after midnight causes a transformation. Getting wet causes rapid reproduction. And what was the third rule?
The third rule is no bright light. Sunlight can actually kill them.
Sunlight will actually kill them. That says that number one, they are a nocturnal species. They are from a water-starved area. And the third one is their reproduction. It's rapid and it's caused by water. So that says to me that this is a creature. There's a lot of creatures, animals and plants that exist when there are very little resources in a sort of stasis state. But then once water appears, they turn green, they bloom, they drop their seeds, then they go back to being twigs, right?
Right.
Yeah. So it seems like the Mogwai are such a creature. You water them, And then suddenly they're like, let's reproduce. But now, what is up with this transformation thing? When I think of a creature transforming in such a way, there's two types. There's the one where you're a larva and you transform into your adult form. Then there is what grasshoppers do when they become locusts. Swarm. So to me, it seems like the gremlin is a combination of the two. Let's talk about what the transformation looks like. I already talked about reproduction.
Right.
Describe for our viewers.
Okay, so basically, if we want to talk about it as like the life cycle of a gremlin, you start as a Mogwai, who is the very, very cute gizmo that we see, as well as the other creatures. They're furry, they have big ears, they have big eyes, and then when they get wet, as Hakeem described, it's weird. It almost looks like their skin is like bubbling underneath, and then suddenly you see a bunch of fur balls pop out. And then in some very lovely scenes in the movie, you see these little fur balls kind of like open up and their big ears pop out and their eyes open up. And suddenly you have more cute gremlins.
Yeah.
The next stage of their transformation is if you feed them, and they'll stay as gremlins, as Mogwai. If you feed them after midnight, suddenly they basically form a cocoon, right? Like a caterpillar. So the fur seems to dissolve. They're sort of slimed over, and they seem to be in these pods. And then eventually they make their way out of the pods, and they have a much more lizard-like appearance. They're sort of scaly and greenish or brownish. Still big eyes. They still have the ears. Like, it's clearly the same creature, but in a very, very different form.
The teeth become much more menacing, and their intentions in the world become much more sinister, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what is that saying to me? That says to me that this creature exists in such a state that when water shows up, they will get, they have this, okay, we got a little bit of time, let's do our thing. After they pop off their reproduction things, they gorge themselves after midnight the next day, right? And then they bounce to go to their next location for whatever reason, which I don't, there's nothing that tells me what that may be. But now let's talk about the babies popping off. So that almost sounds like, them babies running their mouth too much. But the baby's popping off.
Babies are popping off about this and about that. Oh my God.
I mean, shouldn't you wait till you can stand up before you start talking trash? So
there's actually a production reason that you don't see Gizmo stand up, but I'll save that for later.
Save that for later. That's a good one. Yes. So here's what I mean by two ways to interpret Mogwai reproduction. They get wet, they bubble, and babies pop off. One idea is that they are reproducing the way the small protists reproduce, called hydra, right? Mm-hmm. When they have times where food is aplenty, they make these little buds, right? And these little buds will bud, and each one will become another hydra. So here's the deal. What if they're not budding? What if
the Mogwai?
The Mogwai. What if they're not budding instantly? Because it's the instantly thing. Even a hydra as a single-celled organism takes some time. So what's going on here? Maybe they already have fertilized embryos, like a kangaroo in its pouch has this little thing, then you only see the joey later. It gives birth, but there's a two-step birth process, if you will, right? So maybe the Mogwai have these fetuses in wait that are already fertilized. And then, because there's so much genetic variation that you see in their appearance, it makes it seem like they're not copies of the parent, right?
That's a really good point. Because actually one of the things like that relates to a story thing I was thinking about, which is that it would seem with the fur balls popping off that they would just be genetic copies. Like that's where my brain goes. But a story point is that every other Mogwai that Gizmo are cute, delicious, like yummy. By that I mean sweet, like now I'm just using
Like
words for
fried or
appetite.
on
No,
the grill?
I'm dialing it back because I knew you were going to take it to a place of eating
You
Gizmo.
knew I was
No,
gonna
you're
get
the very like cuddly and nice Gizmo seems to only produce other Mogwai that are very different temperament wise, slightly different physically, but really not clones in any way. So,
right. Exactly.
yeah.
Not clones. Exactly.
Yeah.
Nailed it. Right. So that seems more likely to me. That it's a pre-packaged embryo that's just waiting to get wet to pop out and do its thing. Because there's a lot of animals that do that. They wait till they get wet and then they do their thing, right?
So wait, so I have a weird question, and I know this is a bio question. So, I mean, are there, when thinking about, okay, so if essentially somehow those pre-fertilized embryos are inside the Mogwai already and we're just waiting for the water, is that something that a single organism can produce inside of itself? Or is that something where you need a differently sexed partner to do the fertilization and then it's waiting?
That's what
Basically,
I think.
I'm asking if Gizmo has to have sex. If your
Not
theory is true,
necessarily.
does Gizmo have to have sex?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. Because, they could be like plants or like animals that release their stuff into the water and then you walk through it. They could, you can fertilize in many different ways. So here's the deal, though. You know how it is with us nerds. You do a little bit too much research and you find out things that are like, evidently the Mogwai were engineered. They're human engineered things, right? Made in the lab. Maybe not even human, right? So
it's
my
not
whole
canon.
idea.
It's not canon, though. That's from a novel. It's not canon. So it's a possibility. It's a possibility. We can leave it as a possibility.
Okay, it's not a definite. Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
There you go. It's not definite. Because I was like, that throws my whole adapting to your environment thing out of the window.
No, I like your adapting to the environment. Yeah. I mean, there have been, like we mentioned before, there's 2 movies, there's an animated series, there's also video games, there was a novelization, and I believe it's in the novelization of, I think it's the first movie, that they throw that theory out there, but it's technically not canon. So, what?
There's 2 things I forgot to tell you.
Yeah.
One thing is the midnight thing. Why midnight? Okay. Again, that already exists in the animal world. There are, even humans, our biology adapts to astronomical cycles of day, month.
Sure, circadian rhythm.
Right. Exactly. The second thing is the big ears. That desert they're in, it's even hot at night. So they got to cool their blood. So there you go. That's it. That's all of my Mogwai biology discussion.
So going with your theory, your definitive answer to does water-inspired reproduction fly when it comes to Gizmo and the Mogwai?
Yeah, if it's not made in the lab, I see every element of what this creature does as already existing in the natural world. So all they did is combine it in a new, different, weird way.
I like it. I'm into it. I love the idea that this would be scientifically possible because I love the Gremlins.
Yeah, I mean, they're all there. Everything's there. The natural world has already done all of it. But that's another thing, right? Even in science, there are what are called biomimetic devices that are built. You look at nature and you're like, oh, let's do it that way. That's how submarines went from looking like ships that are underwater to looking like whales, right? They're like, hey,
makes sense.
Nature did it, right? So it looks like these science fiction writers, in many cases, are also taking the ideas of nature and mimicking it in a new context, right? To create a beautiful story and, manipulate us by hitting our human sentiments.
There is actually an animal that the creature designer did base it on. So, excuse me. So Chris Columbus, who's the writer, thought he was going to be a comic book, either an illustrator or an artist. And ultimately he became a writer and a very accomplished director as well. And so, I mean, he directed Home Alone. He directed Mrs. Doubtfire, 2 Harry Potter movies. So he's done okay for himself. When he did the script, he also did a bunch of drawings that, kind of showed the initial design for the Gremlins. So the creature designer, his name is Chris Wallace. He took Chris Columbus's designs and then really went to town on them. And he had actually worked on the melting faces at the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark. So, they knew he could do this, but they even explored using actual monkeys for for the creatures in this film.
Yeah.
The monkeys were not happy when you put the Gremlins costume mask on them. So no.
Didn't
So
work.
yeah. So this was all practical effects. It was all puppetry, except for one stop motion scene in the first movie when you see all of the Gremlins like running down the street together after they've had that big scene in the pool.
That stop
where
motion?
That one particular scene is stop motion.
Oh,
but they
wow.
built like a little mini town and they did the stop motion. But everything else is puppetry.
So when you say puppetry, we're talking hand inside, wires, like how
Wires. Yeah.
Wow.
So what's pretty interesting is that Zach Galligan, who plays Billy, the main character, who, is the buddy of Gizmo, he was often wired up with with the whole system that was needed to make Gizmo move. So, he talked about wanting to suspend disbelief, but also that it's really hard to do that when you have, a whole bunch of wires, because there would be anywhere from 1 to 12 puppeteers working, like literally one person to make an eye go bigger, one person to make an ear move, or, so it's pretty amazing when you think about it. And you mentioned Gizmo walking around before. One of the reasons that they really didn't have Gizmo walking was it's really hard to get a puppet to walk and have it look realistic. Right. Whereas Gizmo spends a lot of time in like a backpack or a box.
Right.
They could make his arms move. They could make his face and his head move, but it was a lot harder to get legs to move. So they were like, you know what? We're going to solve that problem by not having him walking around very much.
See, you just snitched on Grogu at the same time.
Yep.
Yeah. And now I realize what happened. The Mogwai are the nocturnal versions they're the moths, and the Yodas are the butterflies.
Interesting.
Or one is the Neanderthals and the other is the Sapiens. I don't know.
Maybe. Now my brain is going like, well, where does the Force come in? And God forbid that an actual gremlin get use of the Force.
Yeah, right? let's not have Force-wielding gremlins.
No. All right, back to the water. So we're talking about water, we're talking about reproduction. So I will say that one of the things that I love about this movie is that they make it very clear from the beginning what the tone is and what the rules for this world are. Like, you're in a storybook universe. It's slightly heightened. It's very much kind of a callback to and a comment on, like Christmas movies. And I'm talking about the first movie now, and this tone goes into the second as well. But like, Christmas movies and It's a Wonderful Life. There's a lot of media we see on TV, and they lay out our rules right at the top so we know what we're getting into. And by doing that, they really smartly set out the things that we as the audience are going to be on the lookout for, right? Like there's an old saying like for theater with Chekhov, Anton Chekhov, very famous playwright, Russian playwright, that like if you leave a gun on the shelf early in the play, like you got to come back to it. So you lay out these 3 rules, and the water rule is so interesting because like there's water all around us. So as soon as he says that, it's going to be a problem.
That's a hard one. Yeah.
Exactly. And
Can't avoid water when
Yeah.
you're on Earth.
No. And there are so many moments, that it does advance the plot, right? So, it starts with Corey Feldman, who plays like little Corey Feldman in his youth, who plays Billy's friend Pete, who accidentally spills water because accidents happen. And then you get your first burp, 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 burp. So your first budding happens.
So I see, I read that a part of the philosophy of the movie was to sort of poke fun at certain tropes that existed, right? And so I'm wondering if the reproduction is inspired by the tribbles of Star Trek. Remember, they just reproduce.
I mean, it's possible. I'd be curious
and cute.
Yeah. So wait a minute. Are the tribbles like the outer? Is a tribble what happened when a Mogwai got onto a ship that left the planet? And
there you go. Yeah, maybe a tribble crossbred with a Yoda, and you got Mogwai.
I don't know. That's a great question that I would love to know the answer to. So if you're a Gremlins fan or a Star Trek fan and you know about any crossover, please let us know.
And what are all the tropes they poke fun at in the movie. That wasn't obvious to me. I just encountered that upon preparation for this.
There's a couple things. So we mentioned already sort of your classic movies, right? Like the storybook world of It's a Wonderful Life. So Joe Dante, who directed the film, this was like his first big studio film. He'd been working for Roger Corman, who is a very famous B movie director. So all kinds of like very low budget B movies, like, and so before this he had done Piranha and The Howling. And Spielberg was like, I think this is the guy for Gremlins. And so he was a big horror fan. So there's this scene towards the end of the film, when this is the first Gremlins, when Billy is battling, I believe it's Stripe, actually, who's like the lead mean gremlin with the mohawk. So he's battling him, and they make full use of this crazy department store set. And there were things that actually happened that were written in the script to do. And then there were things that when they got on set, they got inspired by the incredible production design. And so there's a scene where Spike grabs the chainsaw, and Billy fights him off with a bat, which is an homage to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So yeah, and then like there's a moment with the Wicked where you have a gremlin who puts on a hat, and as they are melting from the sunlight, you hear "What a world! What a world! What a world!" which is a direct homage to the Wicked Witch of the West and Wizard of Oz. You also have a character named Mrs. Deagle, who's played by Polly Holliday in the first movie, who's like the very mean lady banker in town, and very much that like stereotypical small world, like, I'll get you. And she does. She actually says,
I want your dog.
Again, Wizard of Oz tone. So those are some of the Easter eggs in there.
Toto.
In Wizard of Oz, Toto's the dog.
Yes. I think Benji.
Different dog.
I know.
Different dog. Yeah.
I wonder how many of the old school dogs Gen Z knows, like Rin Tin Tin, Lassie, Benji, Toto. They probably know Toto.
I would think Toto for sure. I don't know about the rest of them, though. I will. But speaking of dogs, the design for Gizmo and for the Mogwai was actually inspired by the Spaniels. For the creators. Yeah.
So that's the thing about dogs. You can say, oh, dogs are such cute animals like the Mogwai, but they're not, because we engineered them, right? I mean, even though baby mammals generally are cute, no matter what it is. Oh, cute baby tiger. I once encountered a baby cat in the wild, and a juvenile cat. So I taught observational astronomy, right, in the Bay Area, in the hills there. And this one night I'm leaving the observatory at like 2-3 a.m. and there was a barbed wire fence. Across the fence was a parking lot and this research institute, right? It's two research places on the same little hill. They had built a little ladder thing that went over this barbed wire fence on each side. So I'm walking down the road, and I turn to go to the ladder, and I see a small animal there. And I stop, and caution. And then my mind goes, oh, that's a baby cat. That's a little cat. But it's a wild cat, not a, so it's big.
Yeah, like not a domesticated cat.
Yeah, even though I recognize the juvenile. And I'm like, oh, that's a juvenile. It'll probably run away when I take a step towards it, right? And I take a couple steps toward it, and I'll be like, oh, snap. Mama might be around. And I literally ran and leaped over the fence in a single bound. So it's like, hey, I guess that ladder isn't necessary after all. So anyway, all that said, the water for reproduction, is it really necessary to be water? If you could do, is it because of the setup that you said? Like really what you want to do is create an army of gremlins. That's the movie goal, right?
For the gremlins,
continuous creation of them if you can. And then there's a scene where Stripe is like, on my last gasp, I'm going to create a new army. right?
Yeah.
I've already convinced myself of the answer that water is a very convenient way of doing this. Yeah.
There was an interview that I read, and I don't remember if it was Joe Dante who said it or Chris Columbus who said it, but basically they were like, we're creating a fantasy horror movie. So we're going to lay out these rules, and you either decide to believe them or you don't. And if you don't, then you're not going to dig the movie because you're going to be like, this is too fantastical. It doesn't make sense. But if you do, if you go with the water, the eating after midnight and the sunlight rule, then we will take you on this trip and you will hopefully love it. And I think that they use it really effectively because even like, because you do, as you were saying, you've got Stripe, who's very strategic about his use of water. Like in the first movie, you have the big scene where, he gets to the YMCA and jumps in the pool. And suddenly it's like bubbling and lights and this and that. And that's how he creates his gremlin army, and then later on, you've got even in the department store, there's an indoor fountain kind of a thing that has water running through it. And again, he sees the opportunity there. And that leads to the fact that in addition to fueling plot, in a way, the water rule also helps to define character because it's really clear. It's really clear. And this is true in both movies and actually in the animated show that our hero, Gizmo, does not want to be near water, at least not around humans. We don't know if that's the case when he may be with other Mogwai, but at least around humans, he is scared of water. He doesn't want to be around it. Whereas Stripe embraces it. So you kind of get a sense of what each of these creatures is about. They get that, they see the potential of it, and Stripe embraces the danger. And Grogu goes Grogu, hello.
Yeah.
Gizmo goes the opposite way. So I think they do a really good job of using it to help tell the story, to help us figure out who these characters are. And I think the other thing too is like, especially for, younger audiences watching this movie is actually rated PG.
Exactly.
And so
and
interesting. It's super fun. So this also came out. Spielberg was really busy that summer. This also came out the same summer as Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, which we've talked about in a previous episode, was one of the reasons for creating the PG-13 rating, which used to not exist, right? Like it was just PG, which parents felt safe taking their kids to, or it was R, which you did not unless you had really cool parents who would take you. But this movie also was one of the movies that contributed to that change in rating by the Motion Picture Association, because the advertising for it was purposely made to suggest E.T.
Oh, really?
Like you had like a clothes. I don't remember if it was a box or the little like container that he's in, and you just kind of saw like the paws sticking out. So it was very reminiscent because obviously that had been a huge hit for Spielberg and the world.
I loved E.T. I thought it was the best movie I'd ever seen for a long time as a young guy.
Sobbed my way through it.
Man, when they touch fingers, I
know. Well, clearly we're gonna have to do an ET episode, right?
Yeah, an ET episode. Yes.
Just like
so what
is
your? I'm hearing it. I already know the answer. I'm not even gonna ask you. I know you too well.
Oh, do you now? You thought I had a nice clean desk, so I don't know how well you know me. But
good point.
No, I'm just kidding. You actually do know me really well, and you know when I get excited over a movie and when I think something works. Like I love the fact that I think that the way that they have set up this movie with rules like the water rule actually factor into helping to tell the story, to surround to contributing to great character, and to the fact that like it's an easy rule, right? Like these aren't complicated rules. And so when we're watching, are like, oh, could I keep him away from the water? I could probably keep him away from the water, right? Like it's very easy for the audience member to put why are you?
It's inevitable. Just like you said earlier, it's inevitable. You're going to come in contact with water.
Oh yeah, I know, but I guess
Yeah.
what I'm saying is like the audience member will start asking that. You're not
Oh,
saying
right. Yeah.
like to take care. The rules for this involve like a
Right.
really
Yeah.
complicated
Yeah.
gadget that you as the
Right.
audience member are never going to get your hands on. It's like the
Right.
everyday stuff, like your
Everyday
snacks.
stuff. Right. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so
And who doesn't eat after midnight?
I might have been doing that last night with a pack of chuckles. So not kidding
My
about
mind went
that.
to the pizza window next to the club. But anyway.
Many different kinds of eating after midnight. So, but I was home last night. So I can say definitively
Yes.
reproduction through water for me definitely flies when it comes to story for Gremlins. But now, does it fly for the vibes? My question to you is, would you want a Mogwai for a pet?
It depends.
If you were offered one.
If they had named the show, instead of naming it Gremlins, they named it Mogwais. That was a joke. I guess that one didn't fly.
I missed the joke.
Because that would suck as a name for a movie. Mogwai.
Yes, Mogwai. Why not? Why no? Although this is a funny. Okay, but that does remind me of a funny random piece of trivia. So, Zach Galligan, who again plays Billy, the lead, he apparently filled a whole action scene for the end of the movie. Where the way that ultimately that Stripe, the evil nasty gremlin, is defeated is that he is exposed to sunlight in this department store. And in the movie, we see that it is Gizmo who does that. But actually, Billy, the character, there'd been a whole action scene where he was featured as the one who has that big heroic moment. And that's what Zach, the actor, thought was happening. So when he went to go see it for the first time.
No way.
Yeah, he turned to the director and was like,
surprise.
What happened? I thought I was the one who gets to save the day.
Yeah.
And he was like, what's the name of this movie?
There you go.
Gizmo gets to be the hero.
That's right. Yeah. And by the way, homeboy, that ain't you on screen. That's my character. You are sitting here watching it. That is the character. So would I want one? I would love to have a Mogwai as a cute, cuddly pet.
Mm-hmm.
I have an experience with the gremlin. It wasn't an actual gremlin. A buddy of mine in Florida owned these monkeys with human faces. Look it up. They have a hairless face that looks humanish.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. And he was like, move slow. Don't worry if he bites you or removes his teeth or something. I forget what the deal was. Man, that monkey was cool until he wasn't. And he went full gremlin on me and started, I boxed the monkey.
Who
and
won?
Luckily, my friend took him out because I was about to knock him out. But, he got a few good ones in on me before I could react.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I'm like, so when you say, would you want to own it? I'm thinking, you know what? What if I owned an actual gremlin? If I had him on a leash, it would be like a dude with a pit bull on a leash, right?
Oh, you're talking about it in gremlin form now.
Yeah, in gremlin form.
Okay.
Yeah. We had a mean one. It's like having a pit bull on a leash. You know what I mean? That's kind of
That's true.
tough guy, cool, right? But then my mind went to that dang monkey. And I was like, no, I don't, no. I don't want a gremlin. Maybe a Mogwai, but
Right.
there's no way it's going to avoid water with me. So I'm going to end up having a house full of them. And what really matters to me when it comes with pets is two things. Do you have to live indoors and do you have to go to the doctor? Because my adulthood dog having in comparison to my childhood dog having are two different things. I had country dogs. They live outdoors. They never go to the doctor. In my adulthood, I got a Yorkie named Christopher.
That's very different.
With a fur at the end. Yeah. That dog was so expensive.
Mm-hmm.
It had to go to the doctor. I travel a lot. It had to go to the doggy hotel. Christopher is now a member of an Italian family in Boston because they were my neighbors and they lost their Yorkie to an accident. And I was like, I have a 1-year-old Yorkie that, they're like, oh, we love him. And we love the name Christopher because it's fur.
You're like, here you go.
Here you go. Yeah.
This
they're
is
like, and don't,
for you.
it was very, right? And they were like, wait a minute, and we won't change the name. 2 weeks later, he was Louis.
Oh, I like Christopher.
Me too. Now Christopher is forever Louis.
All right.
Yeah. So yeah, I love little cuddly creatures, but it depends. It's a nice pet to have, right? But the feeding part I can pull off. But the water part, not possible. I can't. It's inevitable.
Yeah, I think like as cute as they are, I just in the Mogwai form, I probably got to say no, because I think like that's kind of the point about the whole franchise, right? Like no matter how well you think you might take care of this thing,
Yeah. Right.
there's always going to be like someone accidentally spilling water or, I also like my house is filled with a lot of light. So the whole sunlight thing doesn't work so well.
Yeah.
And then the not eating after midnight. I mean, I'm nocturnal, so I'm usually up late at night having
Right. Okay. But what if you were deeply depressed? That means you're staying in the dark. You're not bathing or eating.
No, if you're deeply depressed in my world, you're eating a lot of snacks.
I'm the opposite. When I stress or, I haven't been depressed in a while, but, my 20s, my partner, my ex-wife was like, she was a nurse. I think you have manic depression. And I was like, why do you say that?
So no eating for you when you're depressed?
No, I get skinny. I lose weight. Yep. I'm like Luther Vandross in that way. That's what he would say. Yeah.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I saw him in an interview. I think it was with Oprah. He was like, she's like, oh, you put on weight again. He's like, it means I'm happy. Or the vice versa. I don't know.
So given my experience with that, as much as I would love the cute furry version, I do not have enough faith in myself or my environment that I would do a good enough job taking care of it to have it not devolve into a mass of murderous gremlins. And I don't want to unleash that on the world.
Okay, I feel you. But I have another approach to it.
Yeah.
What if, for example, it was a wild species that lived, for example, in the Atacama Desert, where there's never been a drop of rain in recorded history.
Yeah.
And you can see them just like eking out a living, going through their, processes and reproducing when they can and, this sort of thing. So they don't there's a vast expanse, so they never make it a civilization, right? And their population is kept low just because there's just not enough resources to support them. So they exist, they eke out a living. We see them in nature documentaries. But we don't, what's going to happen? Somebody's going to be like, I want one.
You know what the name of the nature documentary is?
What?
Mogwild. Ba-dum-bum. Hey, if we pivot the question from would you want a Mogwai as a pet to would it be cool to just like have them in the world in a sort of way that would be kind of self-contained, then yeah, absolutely. That would be amazing to see.
That's what I thought. And then I realized that there are people who have the wealth and the means to say, I want that, bring it to their town, and then next thing you know, we're overrun by gremlins. The apes start talking, and killer robots are coming back from the future. So,
all right, you're right. You're totally right. I hate to say it, but do Mogwais fly? Do gremlins fly in the real world? The answer would be no. There is a flying gremlin in Gremlins too.
Right.
They created in that lab from the.
And I'm like,
but that's the only place gremlins should fly. Huh?
Hey, that gremlin has 6 limbs. I'm like, you got wings and arms and legs? Like,
oh my God, you have so many things that come out of that lab, right? Like you have the brainy gremlin, you have the you have the brainy gremlin, you have the lady gremlin Greta, you have the winged gremlin, you have the spider gremlin. Like they just went to town with their imagination.
They just went to town with the gremlins. You can make whatever gremlin you want. The mix of gremlin and a giraffe.
A giraffe?
A giraffe.
The giremlin?
The giremlin, the girafflin, the giraffeminlin, the long ass neck gremlin. All right. Friend,
Thank you all.
thank
Now
you
you
for
got-
joining us while we do what we do. One of the things we do, we're like, that old skit from In Living Color, Jamaicans. One job. We both have like 6 jobs, but we love hanging out with you guys. And come check us out every Friday.
That's right. You can find us at Does It Fly Pod on TikTok. You can find us at doesitflypod.com. And I got to give a shout out to our producers who do an amazing job, including links to a lot of the stuff that Hakeem and I talk about in here. So if you want to take a further dive into the science, into some of the movie trivia, definitely check out our website. And we will see you next Friday on Does It Fly.
Bye, besties.